Ronald,
Yes,
thank you for being with me today.
you're
We're
welcome.
going to have a great conversation. So, just to start off, do you mind introducing yourself for those who don't know you yet?
Yeah, of course. My name is Ronald Bernard. Well, as you know, I live in the Netherlands, and my whole life I'm an entrepreneur. And there is a bit of an unusual thing about my life that I share always with people, that I have a first life and I have a second life. And that's because of a near-death experience. I have one moment in my life that my heart was stopped beating. So that's why I say I have a first life and a second life. And in my first life I was quite different than now. In my second life I am a social responsible entrepreneur, serving people, serving local economy. And in my first life I was, so to speak, a bankster. And a bankster is actually nothing more than a top criminal in the financial world. And that's how I ended my career. And official had some titles like trading in currencies, like dollars, German marks in that time. Also dealing in deposit trading for interest rates. And we had also wealth management. So moving the big money of the people tax-free to locations where they are safe with their money, because paying taxes for the normal working class. So that's just in a short way what I did in my life.
And so what changed that, in that moment where you nearly died, what changed that led you into the second life?
The end of my first life was not really chosen by myself. It was a very tough situation I was in, a lot of pressure, and I didn't know how to escape the system where I was committed to. So afterwards you can say that it was a sort of given present, that my heart stopped and they reanimate me, they bring me back to life. And during the near-death experience I had a deep touch in the direction of nature. I found out by a lot of testimonies afterwards, because I thought that it was all not true, what was happening with me. But in this experience, I get really in touch with nature. I saw planet Earth, so to speak, but then in a much more beautiful way. And I could even, I was in connection with nature. So the whole feeling, the interaction was becoming one. And this experience of being really in touch with nature was the first touch I have with nature in my whole life. Because in my first life I was hating life, I was hating nature. I was only in the way of heading to full destruction of whatever I can destruct. So for me this was a real deep touch. Something was going inside of me, and it was not, I couldn't erase it anymore. So this near-death experience, I have seen many things in this near-death experience, but the deepest touch was coming from a contact with nature. I have also seen how a human, after a man and a woman are making love, and out of that a child is coming. It comes out of nothing. And I've seen how this is woven, how this starts to grow from actually nothing. Okay, you have the egg and you have the sperm, but that's micro. And I've seen how all these processes are developing a human being. So I have seen very precious things in this near-death experience who were touching me deeply. And that made that after my recovery, because I have to recover of a lot of damage for at least a year in several hospitals and clinics, but it was the beginning of a restore of myself in a more original way of who I am from birth. And that made me that I only can adore life. And that was also the beginning of the road I have to follow for myself in nature, being a lot in nature, and starting also all the religions on this planet. Like, there is more, I knew now, but what? Because from my first life, I had a picture about a religion who was very dark, and it was based on the history of all the religions. There was nothing good coming out of these organizations. I'm not talking about the people who were following. I'm talking about the management, to conquer other countries, to destroy the Cathars in the south of France. It was like looking at a sort of big multinational enterprises, a business model, instead of serving life, a good stewardship of all life, was not existing in religion. So for me it was really interesting to see what was happening in this planet, what is happening, what was going wrong. And out of this deep touch, I start to search. Is there a creator of all life? Is there really something out of us? And I found through nature that nature is a very high intellectual development program, especially if you go deeper in the details of a flower or whatever. It's amazing. It's you cannot ignore, you cannot say no, there is no architect. There is no, you cannot say there is no architecture. It is created. So step by step, I started to be a believer. I started to believe that there is a creator of all life, and during my studies, independent studies of the Torah, also the Bible, the Quran. In the end of the day, I found out that it all becomes to one point if it's about the human race, and that's a sort of mission to do a good stewardship of all life on this planet. Everything is given to us. The only question was, please take care of it in a good way. And that was a bit of messy if you look in history. So that's...
I see. I mean, that's a huge shift. So maybe...
It was from the darkest dark in myself through the opposite.
Are you comfortable talking more about the darkness? If we're starting from the beginning, can you explain how it was that you ended up where you were in that first life, and what do you mean when you say that you were seeking destruction?
Yeah, well, that has to do. I'm not the only one in this. Unfortunately, what I'm sharing now is quite common for a lot of people in a certain way. When I was born, everything was fine, and my parents, for as far as I know, especially my mother, she was very happy about my birth, and she started to share quite early in my life to my father that I was the first being she really could love, because my father and mother were coming out of the Second World War as children, and they were heavily damaged. So, out of protection, they were more inside of themselves, protecting themselves to not be vulnerable. So, how can you be a couple if you are locked up in yourself? That's already quite a mission. But they tried. And when she started to share that I was the first human being she really could love straight away from the deepest of herself, that was for my father quite some information if he wanted to hurt my mother. Because in the fucked up situation they were, I grew up in a war zone, and they call it a lovely couple from the outside. But knowing this information, knowing beating my mother doesn't affect her because she was used to it from her youth, she was trained to be beat up, so he started to beat up me. He started to hurt me as much as he can. And that was my first 9 years of my life. And that means she got very deep hurt. It created, of course, in myself also a situation that I was doing the same mechanisms as all the other humans who are starting to be hurt. You start to treat, you go back inwards. You start to create more shields to protect yourself. I was doing the same, but I was also starting to copy his behavior, the behavior of my father. So I started to beat up children in school time. I was in the second class, because the third I couldn't make, but the second, and the sixth class was quite some higher. There was a difference between me and the others 4 or 5 years older, but through wooden sticks and so on, I became really a terror on the school, and I started to dominate the whole school in terror. So that was noticed, and that started investigations. Organizations who need to protect children get involved, so investigations were coming up, and of course this lovely couple, this perfect gentleman, how could it be? It must be the child, because the parents, no, they're so lovely couple, it's the outside. Neighbors, no. This man violent? No. Even my mother once was going to the police station to share all the violence. They just laughed. They didn't take it serious in that time. So after the investigation, the advice was given that this child needs to be investigated. You have to look in the brains, maybe there is something wrong with him, and they gave the advice to put me in a safe house. It was from the Catholic Church, and it's just 2 years ago my mother shared with me that why she was agreeing about sending me to the safe house was because my father had said always, if you divorce me, I kill him. And by sending me away, she saw her chance to divorce him. Like, he is safe, now I can go. No killings. So now, since 2 years, I know why she did it. With all the damage I received already the first 9 years, I came in this safe house, and this was, afterwards I can say this was the first contact with satanistic, satanic rituals and satanic abuse, because I was still 9 years, it was 2 years in my life I have experienced this, also other children, that they start to abuse, sexual abuse of children. I was involved in that in my youth. So when I came out of this Catholic safe house, I was already an adult, because at the moment you get the sexual part involved in your life as a child, you're not a child anymore, it's all gone. And if it's about raping children, well, adults, I think it doesn't have a difference. You lose everything. If you have in yourself a sort of value, like a good self-reflection with yourself, like you look in the mirror and you say, yeah, I'm fine. I have value, I'm accepting myself. If you go through this kind of experience of torture, rape and all this kind of things, you lose everything. You're zero and it won't come back. So it takes your whole life, and hopefully others have different experience, that they say, oh no, after a year it was fine with me and I forgot everything. Could be. But out of the context I had in my life, I noticed that a lot of people have the same thing with themselves. Their self-image is not really in a high standard. So the damage is nearly permanent. And out of all this experience, when I came out in late of my 11th year, so I say I was 12, I came out, I was an adult. Childness, everything was gone. But I was also full of hate and anger, because I didn't know better based on my experience. And what I saw in studying history, seeing what people are doing worldwide, the picture didn't get better. So this hate, this intense hate, this anger, it's of course a choice, you can always choose different, but I chose to go in a direction of destruction, because for me it was really like taking care of myself, to get a lot of power, to get a lot of money, with the goal, the more powerful I become, the more I have access to instruction, because I didn't care about whatever. It was only me, myself and I, and for the rest, nothing. So when I became a young adult, well, the beginning was actually when I was 12, because when I came home, so to speak, my mother lost everything. She was divorced, she was in a caravan and had no food. So when I came out of it, I started to take care of my mother. So I started stealing in public domain. I started stealing flowers, make them to a small bouquet, and start selling them from door to door, and I start stealing food, and I start to hustle to take care of myself and my mother. So I became a sort of entrepreneur already, and I start dealing in goods from Second World War, especially German goods, because the helmets and all the things, most of that material was destroyed after the Second World War, of course, because everybody hated the Nazis. So it was quite rare to find these German outfits. So I started dealing in this kind of stuff as well, all the army stuff from Second World War. So I build up, and I have to, by law, I have to follow also school. But if it was about exams, I always picked out the best students of the class, and when we have the exam, I sit near to them. I paid them in advance some money, and they gave me all the answers. And we have to be careful, otherwise it was too perfect, like how is this possible? He's never there, or he's not studying, how can he make a 10? So we always have to be careful about taking all the information. We have to make also the wrong answers. But this is how I received my diplomas, my papers from school. I was always hustling for everything, so being an entrepreneur. So in that line, it became, I only want to make money to receive more power. So I start to be in the fashion clothes for ladies. We did it not through Paris but Istanbul, which is another fashion line. I started to be dealing in cars, second hand. Also mechanic place later on. I started to do import-export. I started to do many things to go quick out of that, because then we jump years. It started to be noticed by traders on the stock markets, where you change currencies, because we have also in the import-export, when people from Russia came in the Dutch harbors, they have always cigarettes and booze and all the things who were not official imported, and we bought it. So out of all this we get also, in import-export we get currency, and I start to trade also through the dealers on the market. I start to deal with currencies. So they watched me growing in the financial market, in the stock market, in the exchange market of currencies. They start to notice me, like, hey, he's growing, more money is coming in. I start also working for unofficial, working for local banks who were in the borders of countries like Germany, Holland, Belgium, Holland, because there was a lot of exchange in currencies, because the Germans were buying in the Netherlands, the Belgians were buying in the Netherlands, and vice versa. The Dutch were going to their countries. So the local banks have quite huge stocks of different currencies. And if in that time it was not all registered, you get assignments to take the bulk of Belgian francs and to make a swap to Dutch guilders in that time. So making also profit. So more and more I start to do currency trade. So in the market they notice this. And this is the time when one of the old, the veterans in this currency trading and market trading say, "Hey Ronald, why are you doing all this? You're doing cars, clothes, import, export. Why? What's your goal?" And I said it straight away, like, I want to make money, 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 huge piles of money. I want to become the richest one, the most powerful one in this world. I didn't give the reason. And he said, "Well, stop all this hustling around with all these tradings. Go in the money, in the finance. There is the big money. You save a lot of energy, you save a lot of time. Go straight in." And he offered me the license he owned. He offered me the company he owned to go under his wing to start trading in the markets. So he was becoming my teacher. He gave me the umbrella because I didn't have all this license. So we made a construction through offshore that I was becoming the owner, but under his wings. And he started to teach me all his knowledge. So this was my real entry, starting in finance, climbing up the ladder. So this is how my first life starts to develop.